Hey y'all, so it looks like I'm gonna get started now. So I'm gonna start off with a few Unit 1 questions here, then we can move to Unit 2 and see where everybody's at. And you guys can try to tell me answers in the chat and stuff, or whatever y'all wanna do. I'm really good with anything. I have the chat set to private mode right now, so you guys can both answer individually and so can everyone else to practice. Alrighty, so let's look at question number 13 first. The name of a location on Earth's surface is. Does anyone know the answer to this? While you guys are thinking of it, you can just put the letter in the chat real quick. I'm just going to kind of work through this. So basically, there are some things that we can just probably eliminate off the bat because they don't really even exist, kind of. So scale name. So scales of analysis is a concept in Unit 1, but there's no such thing as a scale name. So I'm going to eliminate that one, so that's not a choice. A geonym is not a thing. Situation and site. So site versus situation is one of the major things in Unit 1. It's also mentioned in Unit 6 later, and it's a little bit more important there. But site versus situation is basically just where is this relative to another place, and where is it important there. So site is going to be physical surroundings, while situation is going to be where is it? So the correct answer here is going to be D. So it looks like both of you guys actually got this wrong, which is completely okay, because if you haven't learned it yet, that's not a problem. And also a lot of teachers kind of throw this concept, toponyms, in with Unit 3. So don't feel bad. Let's move on to number 14. That one is actually not something that I'm going to cover today because I feel like that does not go with Unit 1 at all. So the frequency of something in a given within a given unit of area is. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and try to define all of these vocab words for you while you put whatever letter you think it is in the chat. So the frequency of something within a given area. So let's start here. So dispersion is how far out things go. So I'll disperse to the other end of my house or something. Distribution is just these 4 dots right here. They're distributed in these locations. They're distributed this far away from each other. Pattern is just square, circle, square, circle. And this goes into question 14, which I might get to later if we want to keep going with this. Township and range system is a pattern of where people live. So the frequency of something within a given unit area. So now we don't really think that it's E or D because those definitions don't really make that much sense. So let's look at A and B. So density is people per land area. So my density could be 35 people per kilometer squared. Concentration is going to be I have this box and there are 3 dots in this box, so there are 3 dots in this amount of space. So concentration and density are actually really similar, and it looks like both of you said density, which is correct, because concentration you'll not see as a vocab word in human geography. So density is your correct answer here. And usually the frequency of the something is going to be people in APHUG. So a hearth. Does anybody know what the answer to this question is? This one's more of a definition of just tell me what hearth is. I'm not going to talk through this one because even if you don't know the definition of hearth, you should be able to kind of think through it. Because if you look at the word hearth, you're going to see the word heart inside of it. And the heart is the central place of something, right? So I told you I wouldn't talk through it, but now I kind of am. Oopsies. Okay, I've just got a few chat messages. So I see B and C. Okay. So let's see. So let's just try to look at, I'm sorry, it was A and C. You corrected yourself. So I'll only focus on why we're not going to talk about B, D, and E right now. So B, the process by which a feature or trend spreads. That one is diffusion, not hearth. So we gotta remember our vocab words in APHUG, and when you learn them, it's super important because later in the course, it's gonna focus on applying these vocab words. So that's diffusion. So D, the modification of a culture as a result of contact with a more powerful one. No. So this one you're gonna see in Unit 3, so I'm not really gonna go into it much, but this is syncretism. 3, the perimeter of or boundary marked by a regional feature. So that's not a hearth. So this is just more like your cultural landscape. So now let's examine C and A and see which one is right. So C says an area defined by one or more distinct features or trends. So this one right here is going to be when we're talking, I don't want it to be that big. So this is when we're going to be talking about the concept of place, which is one of the 5 major themes of human geography. So if we can just think about it for another second, we only have one answer choice left, which is A. And also, of the 4 of you here, I've seen in the chat that one of you hasn't learned this, which is not a problem. And I'm going to try to go through and make sure I'm defining everything as we go, so you're not left in the dust. So in this boxes, which 2 have the highest concentration of dots? So we're going to be looking at these boxes right here, A, B, C, and D. It's the highest concentration. Does anybody just want to like take a stab at this? This one is kind of just, what's the difference between density and concentration? That's what you're going to be examining in this question. Because the next question you're going to see is about density. So it looks like a few of you have said D, a few of you have said B. Okay, so D and B. Let's examine those. So I'm just going to come out and tell you that the correct answer is B. So let's see who got it right. Riley got it right. Okay, so Riley, that is 100% correct. So B and D have the highest concentration because they're the closest together. C, concentration, C, close. So remember when I said this question was testing the difference between density and concentration? Well, this next question is going to be looking at density. So density is just going to be, we have the same box, so we have the same amount of land. So what's the other part of density that I just talked about? Oh, okay. So Trevor read it wrong, and he actually got the answer correct, which is D. So density is just going to be, remember, people dash something over land area. So like I said, it could be 35 people per kilometer squared. So in A, we have 6 people. In B, we have 4 people. In C, we have 3 people. And in D, we have how many people? 6. So since A and D both have 6, that's going to be our correct answer because it's the most amount of dots per the same size box. And that concept will tie into Unit 1 and Unit 2, which we're about to look at. So ignore this FRQ here because we're not going to look at that today. Okay, 19. Which of the following are forms of expansion diffusion? So while you guys put your answer in the chat, I'm going to go over this off to the side a little bit. So in APHUG, we're going to talk about 2 major types of diffusion. They're like umbrellas for the rest of everything else. So we're going to talk about expansion and relocation. So I'm going to check the chat, see if we have any answers yet. Oh, let me show you the answer choices, sorry. So which of the following are forms of expansion diffusion? I'll give you a second to think. Okay, so let's see what I have in the chat. So I have the answers D and B. Okay, so let's just start eliminating. So let's talk about this for a second. It's diffusion. There are 2 main types of diffusion. So we have relocation, which is type 2, and expansion, which is type 1. Kind of did that backwards, but it's fine. And under expansion is kind of like this big umbrella that's going to have these other 3 types of diffusion under it. So we have contagious, hierarchical, and stimulus. And expansion diffusion can be modeled like this. So we have this dot and all these arrows coming off of it. Contagious is basically the same thing, but these arrows have another dot. So these dots, and then these dots each have 4 arrows, and then they go to other people, things like that. Contagious is like that. Now hierarchical is going to be like the most important people have the most power. So this is like Charlie D'Amelio. So if Charlie does a dance, then maybe Lil Huddy and Addison are going to do it too. And then as their fans see them do it, then more people are going to do this dance. So maybe like Noah Beck, and then I'm just making up random TikTokers now. And then we also see some more people who know Addison do it, and maybe Dixie does it down here. But hierarchical is in the shape of a pyramid because the most important people do it first, and then it goes down to the next tier. And mainly you're going to see this when you talk about things like fashion, music, social classes, money, wealth. So that's when you'll mainly see hierarchical diffusion in this course. And the last type is stimulus diffusion. And this one isn't really modeled as well, but let's say we have a circle and it goes somewhere else and it turns into a square. And then that square goes somewhere and it turns into a triangle. But the circle also travels somewhere that turns into a triangle. So this one's a little weird to model, but stimulus basically just means you take this original idea, which is in this case just going to be a shape, and then the circle is going to turn into a square because in this culture, we don't allow circles to be here. We only allow polygons. And then, in this culture, our angles must be greater than 100 degrees or we don't allow the shapes. Like, the point of stimulus diffusion is that the same idea or the same thing is adapting to different cultures. So let's go back to that original question. So it says, which of the following are forms of expansion diffusion? So remember, expansion was the big umbrella with contagious, hierarchical, and stimulus. So let's look to see. So contagious, check. Eponymous, not a word. Hierarchical and formal. Hierarchical, yes. Formal, no. Formal is a type of region. We can talk about that later if we need to. Economic, no. Relocation, wrong type. Contagious and hierarchical, check, check. Looking like D is going to be my correct answer. Relocation, no. Stimulus, check. Also wrong. So here we're going to see that our correct answer is D. So question 20 is going to be referencing these stimuli right here. So it says, the types of diffusion shown in part A and B of the image are which types of diffusion respectively? Ooh, I already have answers in the chat here. So everybody actually both got this question right, and it is going to be A. So earlier, I drew hierarchical in the shape of a pyramid, but you can see that the big dot is taking the idea to some other small dots, which are then taking it to others. And see right here, you can see the shape of a pyramid. And right here, you can see the shape of a triangle. Right here, you can see the shape of a triangle. And then everybody else just kind of gets it too. And then this is contagious because it's just going outward from the source and it's getting everybody in the way. So there are these imaginary circles here. Because the source spreads it to this circle, and that circle spreads it to the other circle. And it just goes like that. Alrighty. So it seems like we're doing pretty good with Unit 1 right now, so I'll look at some Unit 2 stuff. So the government of Bangladesh. So honestly, as an APHUG student, you're probably not like super knowledgeable on whatever the government of Bangladesh is doing at any certain time, but you don't need to be. On the AP exam, you're going to get a ton of questions like this, where it's going to ask you, what about this government? Sorry. Like, what about this government? What if this place imposed this policy? So basically, what you're going to be looking at here is the application of concepts. So when I told you we were looking at vocab words earlier, like, pattern and density, dispersion, diffusion, cultural landscape. The later units in AP Human Geography is when you really apply these vocab words. So let's see if we can do that here. So we're looking at the government of Bangladesh is going to help reduce birth rates. So if we model that, we're going to say our CBR, crude birth rate, is going to go down by providing what? So crude birth rate is just births per 1,000 people in the country. Crude birth rate is really simple. You won't ask to usually do calculations on your AP Human Geography exam because this ain't a math class. Just like Riley said, this is much easier than calc. I'm so glad. But yeah, So the government of Bangladesh has helped reduce birth rates by doing what? So we're going to bring the number of births in a country down. So let's see. Would an economy as developed as Europe bring birth rates down? Well, if you take some leaps and bounds, maybe. But we're not talking about economy right now. We're talking about a social thing, like childbirth. So no. Access to an information about women, universities that women can attend. Maybe, because we're improving the social status of women in society. But that's still kind of a leap. Sorry, I did not mean to cross that one out yet. C, information about choosing sexual abstinence. Maybe. We're still kind of making a leap here because you're getting education. Access to an information regarding the various methods of contraception. Ooh, this one is a lot less of a leap here. So this one is a more direct because this is definitely going to lower births. So that's our biggest maybe right now. So let's cross out A, B, and C because we like D way better than all those. Religious reasons. We have seen in societies that those don't just work. So we're going to go with D because that's the best way that they can do it. They could try those other ways, but they're not as prevalent. They're not as just effective on their own. They need other pieces to them too. So let's look at number 16 since we just talked about birth rate. And then this one is going to be not right now. Thomas Malthus concluded that. So the first piece to this question is, who the heck is this guy named Thomas Malthus? And if you're in the community, the message that I sent out was a bot named Malthus bot because I wanted to be funny because we're going to learn about him today. So who the heck is Thomas Malthus and why does this random kid named Harrison care about him in AP Human Geography? Well, Mr. Thomas M. Also, sorry if I write like I signed the Constitution of the United States. I promise I'm not like trying to make you unable to read my writing. It's just how I write. Okay. Thomas Malthus. So Thomas Malthus is a guy who basically said this graph exists. So food production is linear as time goes on. So on your x-axis here, you're going to have time. I told you we weren't going to do math and AP Human Geography, but I only lied a little. So the y-axis is just going to be stuff. Like this is an amount of stuff versus time. So food grows exponentially. But Thomas Malthus said the human population grew with a J curve, so it grew exponentially. And you can see at this point in time, which when he was alive, he approximated to be around the 1800s, the human population was going to outgrow the food supply. Whoa, scary, right? And he said there was going to be a lot of things like war and famine that were going to cause this to come earlier or later. And they're going to be checks on population, which just means it's going to keep population lower. So, yes, this does look like a graph. You're right. It is math. So, we have these two major checks on population here that are going to cause this dot to shift up or down. And basically, it's just going to say population is going to outgrow food sometime, and our population's all going to die because there are too many of us. Woohoo, right? Positive. Got to stay positive. No. So let's go analyze this question a little more. Yes. But before we go back to the question, actually, focusing on some more bright stuff, let's talk about Esther Boserup. So she is a person who basically said, Malthus, you're dumb. You need to be more optimistic. Like humans are smart. Like we can do crap. So she didn't use a graph. She just said technology. So basically, Esther Boserup said that Thomas Malthus, you are wrong. Shut up. And she said humans are going to find ways to innovate, and they're going to be creative, and they're going to use technology to make food grow more. And they're going to use, this is a graph that I made up, not her, that food is going to start growing like this because the tech is going to allow people to make food, and population's only going to be like this. So we're always going to have more food than the population because the growing population is going to have more smart people who can make smart things and innovations that'll allow us to have more food for the growing population. And we can see today that Thomas Malthus was wrong because we're all alive way past the 1800s. Like, what is it now? It's the 2020s. It is not the 1800s. And if my clock is wrong, then sorry. But no. Esther Boserup, for right now, until we all die, is correct. for right now, unless something happens in 2020, which is totally possible at this point. Because we're inventing things like GMOs. That's a technology to help feed starving countries in Africa, because that's a really overgeneralized phrase, but when we grow a lot of food in Mexico, when we grow a lot of avocados, when the Mexican food growth goes up, then what we're going to see is we're going to see that they have too much food. So they're going to send some food all the way to Africa. And then places that don't have fertile soil and they don't have arable land, they can use this food. So I hope this is bright enough stuff for you, Riley, now that we're actually doing this. The only place right now in 2020, when I took APHUG, this was not a thing, so 2020, I had to write it in bright, sparkly, magical colors because this is just a wonderful year. And we have something that's kind of hurting our population. We're going to see a population dip because of COVID. COVID, Thomas Malthus would probably call a check on our population. So he's going to say, from his perspective, that COVID is going to be something that's going to kill a lot of people. And, well, scientifically, he's right. And so he's going to check the population and say, look, so you guys have more food than you need now because your population's all going to die off, you losers, right? No. Because we're going to come over here and we're going to see from historical events like the Black Plague and the Spanish influenza, that we'll find some way to outsmart this with, guess what? Guess what? Technology. We're going to use innovations in technology with our growing population to be able to fight COVID-19 like we are. You don't got to call me out like that. For people watching the replay or who can't see the message, Riley just sit in the chat, writes horrible diseases in rainbow colors to make them look nice. Yes, I know, but it's okay. Because we got to make them stand out. So now, let's go back to the question that we were going to talk about. Thomas Malthus. So Thomas Malthus concluded that population increased arithmetically while food production increased linguistically. Now, let's divide this into two. So it's talking about population and food. So population does increase arithmetically. But what is linguistic growth? Does somebody want to tell me what that is in the chat? Does anybody know what linguistic growth is? Yeah, it's because linguistic growth doesn't exist. Linguistic means languages. The food population is growing languages. That doesn't make sense. So we can use our rainbow colors again to say, no, A is not correct. The world's rate of population increase was higher than the development of food supplies. Let's go take a look at this graph real quick. So we can see that food supplies are growing less than population. That looks pretty appealing. So-called moral restraint was producing lower crude birth rates. Did I ever use the letter CBR on that graph or talking about this whole discussion? Nope. Population growth is outpacing available resources in every country, according to algebraic calculations. Now, let's examine this for a second. On an AP exam like this, you're going to see questions like this, where you're going to look like you're going to have two correct answers. But I'll come back to this in a second after we examine E. Crude birth rates plus balanced crude death rates. I did not say CBR. I did not say CDR. This question, that answer is incorrect. So now it's just between B and D. And basically our deciding factor is, which one is more correct? Because they're both they could both be okay, but they're not both correct. So the issue here is that this says according to algebraic calculations. We don't know algebraic calculations. Also, it says in every country. This graph is only examining the world. I'm not examining the country of Vietnam. I'm not examining the country of Bangladesh like we just were. I'm not examining the country of Bolivia. So that's way too specific for this question. It says Thomas Malthus concluded that. B. That's what he concluded in the most general terms and in the most correct terms. Okay. 17. In comparing Malthus' theory to the actual world food production and population growth during the last half century, the difference is that. Wait a second. We just talked about this. So Esther Boserup, who was 1900s, Thomas Malthus, who was 1800s. Esther said, technology, bro. Technology's going to help us. Thomas Malthus said, nah, no. Humans are going to grow too fast. So let's come look at this. See how we can compare these two theories. Actual food production has been much higher than Malthus predicted. Well, if we keep thinking about those graphs, maybe. Malthus's theory predicted much higher food production than has actually occurred. So this is the opposite of A. And you'll see a lot of questions like this, where the answer choice is just going to be the opposite of whatever's there. And opposites don't attract on your AP test. This is not your physics class. No. Actual population growth has been much higher than Malthus predicted. Well, I can go pull up a picture of our population growth in 2020, population growth graph. I'll come paste on this whiteboard here. I mean, whenever I'm going to show you this, you'll probably be convinced that it's pretty exponential too. I found a perfect image. The title of this graph should totally give this away. What is the title of the graph? Exponential population growth. Thomas Malthus predicted exponential population growth. So I'm still thinking that even if A is not correct, it's still a way better answer than C. And then D is just going to be the opposite of C. So let's say that. Let's not say that because he predicted exponential. It is exponential. Population increased geometrically while food production increased exponentially. So population increased geometrically. Well, this graph that I just found says it increased exponentially. So, now we're just left with A, our correct answer. Boom. This next question, okay. How does population increase geometrically? It doesn't. So on your AP exam, in this unit, you're going to look at graphs just like a tiny bit. This graph can be labeled as linear, geometric, or arithmetic. So it just means like basic, like no x squared, no 2 to the x, none of that. A graph like this could be labeled exponential. That is the only word you should see for this. So population does not. So in your math class, you shouldn't use these interchangeably, but in your AP Human Geography class, no problem, dude. Just do it. Okay, this next question is going to hit way too close to home. Epidemiologic Transition, ETM. So this relates to something that's super important in AP Human Geography that I do not have the time to explain, called the DTM. And basically, it's just like saying as a country develops, it's going to go through these stages. And ETM, epidemiologic. Where have I heard that word recently in like the past, 7 months? Maybe on the news? COVID-19. Epidemiologic transition is talking about viruses, diseases. Uh-oh. That's not good. We don't like those. I think we've all collectively decided as a society that we're done with the diseases for the rest of our lives. Okay, let's see. So without even knowing anything besides the definition of epidemiologic transition right here, let's go eliminate some things. Causes of death at varying stages of the demographic transition. So we talked about DTM right here, so I can agree with that part. Death. Diseases sometimes cause death, so that's a maybe right now. So let's keep it. The means through which disease is transmitted spatially. Well, like I said, it pairs with the DTM, and even if you don't know what that is yet, I'm just going to tell you that this is not the correct answer because this is about stages that a country goes through. Non-contagious diseases such as heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. Well, I just said it was related to COVID-19, so New food sources. Nah. Pandemics. Maybe. But also, it's not just viruses. It's also diseases, which are going to be things like heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. So E, incorrect, and A is going to be our final answer here. Also, please remember to stop me, especially if you haven't learned this content yet, to make me explain it. Okay, I'm not going to talk about migration yet. So the next few questions are about migration. So in the chat, tell me if you want me to keep going with Unit 2 about population stuff, or if you want me to go over more Unit 1. Unit 1 MCQ questions are going to be a lot more random, I'm going to tell you, than Unit 2, because Unit 2 is a lot more based in actual application of stuff. Okay, so I have 2 Unit 2s and Unit 1, so I'll go with Unit 2 right here. Alrighty. So the Earth area of permanent human settlement is called the, let's see. So, TBH, looking at this, I don't just know the answer off the top of my head. Like I know. Like, this is obviously something I wasn't taught, don't remember, etc. So let's look at this together. So let's start eliminating things just like we did on the last Unit 1. Subpolar region. Well, I'm thinking North Pole, South Pole, Santa Claus, Christmas, cold, polar bears, global warming. Don't really like that one. Ecumene and geophonym. Those both sound like really fancy words, and I don't know the answer to this question, so I'm going to keep both of them for right now. Hot zone. Well, in another unit, you'll learn about something called the hot zone in the Pacific Ocean, which is where there's volcanoes. So, nah. Civilized world. The civilized world is something that you'll learn about in Unit 7, which is a really big misconception. It's basically like, developed countries are civilized. Undeveloped countries are not. No. So, not that one either. Permanent human settlement. So, just let's break down these words together because I don't know. Geophonym. Geo meaning earth. Phonem meaning name. So the name of the earth. The earth. I don't love that one. Ecumene. So, no clue what this word means. I cannot break down the etymology of it. Etymology is just a fancy word for like breaking down the pieces of a word like root words. So, if I know that it's not any of the other answers, then I can eliminate the rest of them because the name for the earth doesn't sound like the name for permanent human settlement. I'm just going to have to go with D. It's my only answer left. You're totally going to have to do things like this in the AP test. I guarantee that you will not know the answer to every question. You're going to have to do things like this, and that's totally okay. You're going to have to do things like this on your in-class tests. And actually, if I Google this, what it's going to pull up is the definition of ecumene. Ecumene is a term used by geographers to mean inhabited land. What is the question asking me about? It's asking me to say the area of permanent human settlement. And it looks like I was correct. Since I was able to eliminate every other answer besides this one, I know that this one's correct. Inhabited land. Permanent human settlement. Permanent home. Like, I'm seeing the correct answer to this all over the place. Okay. Let's move on. This question, I think that my image got left off, so skip. Among the following world regions, the least densely populated is. So this one is definitely going to be another elimination question because it says the word not, or like the least. And I don't learn things by the least. So let's go through this. Among the following world regions, the least densely populated. So East Asia. What's in East Asia? So this is going to be one of the really big geography parts of human geography. So East Asia, China, Japan, etc. That's kind of a lot of people. Like China, the biggest country in the world. So I'm just going to eliminate that one. Let's go to South Asia. South Asia has India, Bangladesh, which if you've learned about this in your class, Bangladesh is the most densely populated place on Earth. It is smaller than the state of Iowa, and it has about half the population of the US. So it has more people than New York City and less space than Iowa. So kind of going to want to eliminate that one real quick. Yeah, yikes is right. Europe. If you've ever looked at a map before, you probably see that Europe is like not a really big continent. Like Europe is smaller than the Americas. So it has a lot of people there though, like Paris, Milan, Rome, London. I can name all of these super important cities with a super lot amount of people. So I'm gonna go through like this with 1 slash mark for right now. Southeast Asia. So we're looking at things here like Singapore, Malaysia. And Singapore is like a tiny dot. It is like the size of New York City, and it has a ton of people. So I'm going to put a whole slash mark through this one. So my options left are Sub-Saharan Africa and Europe. And Sub-Saharan Africa is one of the most used geography terms in this class that people just don't know. So Sub-Saharan Africa is basically just like Sub-Saharan, so south of the Sahara Desert. Interesting. So can you just like name a ton of countries there? So like I can name the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. I can name Namibia. Right, but Kenya. Right, but there isn't a ton of population there. The countries with the biggest populations in Africa are in North Africa and Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia, and in West Africa, in Ghana, in Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire. So if they had to pick a region of Africa that was the most densely populated, I wouldn't go with Sub-Saharan. So I'm going to go with C here. And that's correct. Just like I said, we have to remember that we're going to be using elimination on a lot of questions in an AP class. You will see using elimination on your test in every single AP class you take. Like I promise you, process of elimination is going to be your best friend on multiple choice tests. Like literally. I don't know a single multiple choice test that I've taken in my 12 AP classes that I've taken that I have not used process of elimination on. Like I cannot name a single one. Like APHUG, process of elimination on every single stimulus-based question. APES, AP Environmental Science. It's a science. Totally. Ton of process of elimination. Like, it's a ton. Okay. Physiological density. So this is one of the 3 types of density in APHUG. So we learn about physiological, arithmetic, and agricultural density. So there's not really a good abbreviation for this. My teacher used AP, like arithmetic, RE for Ariana Grande, AG for agricultural, and then Phi. It's like a sorority, AAP. It makes me think of AARP. I don't know, whatever. So arithmetic is just going to be people by land. Agricultural is going to be farmers by arable land. And arable land is basically just like land that's good enough for you to farm on. So when I talked about Africa earlier and like GMOs, I said that there wasn't a lot of arable land. And what that means is there's not a lot of land that you can farm on in Africa, and especially in South Africa. So that's what arable land means. And physiological density is a combo of the two. So it's agricultural and arithmetic put together. So it's people for arable land. Geographers love to use this as like the best form of density. If you saw a form of density on your AP exam, this is going to be the one. You're going to see this one talked about. So we just defined all these. Let's go see. E, farm animals. Did I ever talk about farm animals? No, shut up. People per area suitable for agriculture. Kind of like that one. Sounds cute. People per area of flat land. Nope, that's arithmetic. Farmers per area of farmland. Nope, agricultural. Acres of farmland per total area. This question's asking about population density. Is land a population? I didn't think so. Correct answer is again D. India and the UK have roughly the same arithmetic density, although the landscapes and sizes are quite different. From this, we can conclude that the countries have roughly the same what? So we're talking about arithmetic density here, and we really need to remember the definitions of our different types of density, because looking at some of these answers, I see farm and arable in like half of them. And arithmetic isn't about farmers. So boom, gone. Land to produce food, gone. Farmers, gone. Arable land, gone. I am literally left with one answer choice, just because I remember the definitions. So I have to go with B. Like literally, I read 2 words in the question, and I had to know the answer. A country with a large amount of arable land and a small number of farmers. So we're still on density because we're talking about large and small amounts. So what type of density has arable land and farmers? That, my friends, is agricultural density. So physiological density, out, arithmetic density, out. So now we're just left with C and D. So it's a large amount of land, but a small number of farmers. And we have to remember that density is calculated, like I said in Unit 1, people per land. So let's say this country has 2 farmers and 50 acres of arable land. That gives me a population density of 1/25, which is approximately 0.04. That's pretty low. That's pretty low. Now let's say I have 5 farmers and only 1 acre of arable land. That's going to give me 5, which is a really high number. So we're going to have to go with low agricultural density here. And if I need to go over like the math behind how that works, I can, but I'm going to assume that you guys can just get that one. So this is another definitional question. So we might have to use process of elimination here. Average number of births women bear in their lifetime is. So we talked about crude birth rate. So whenever you see total in front of something, just like cross it out. Like you don't need that. So crude in APHUG just means per 1,000. So we talked about crude birth rate earlier as being birth per 1,000. But this is births women bear in their lifetime. So birth rate is out. Total increase rate. That's not about births. That's about increasing population. Out. So now we're left with fertility. So did this question ever say per 1,000? I mean, if you guys can see it, props to you because I can't. So I'm going to go with total fertility rate, which is correct. Okay, so these next questions are about population dynamics, which I'm not going to talk about today. And then, okay, population pyramid right here, number 11. Population pyramids, I'm probably going to need slides for, not going to lie. So the population pyramid of a city in southern Florida, Arizona, or even northern Japan may appear blank because the city's population is dominated by elderly people. So I'm going to pull up some slides real quick. You guys are going to get to see my pretty face. Hello. Okay. As I'm pulling up my slides. Okay. Population composition. So what have we talked about today? So we've talked about world population distribution. Where is the least dense? So we looked at, in that one question, we looked at sub-Saharan Africa, which is down here in the south, not densely. Whoa, east, southeast, and East Asia, so much population. Europe, so much population. So we kind of can see how we got that question right. We're seeing the world population distribution here. Each of these chunks has 1 million people. More than the continent of Europe, the whole continent of Africa. That's a ton of people. We talked about the major population clusters in that one question: East Asia, South Asia, Europe, Southeast Asia. So those are all answer choices that we were able to eliminate. But we didn't know that there were 4 major population clusters. Now we do. Demographics. So this is crude birth rate, crude death rate, all that good stuff. Arithmetic density, physiological density, people per arable land, people per land, farmers per arable land, all that good stuff. I'm speeding through these slides that we already talked about, so please tell me if you want me to slow down. Like, please let me know. Because I'm going to be ending whenever we're done talking about population pyramids today. Okay. So, So this one is about persons per square kilometer. So we know that this map is arithmetic density. So I actually want to take a second to look at this just to analyze maps, because that's a really big part of human geography, is analyzing maps with scales of analysis. So what we can see here is the highest arithmetic densities are in Europe and Asia. The major population clusters kind of make sense, but we also see some really high arithmetic densities in the Caribbean. Let's look at that later. So now we're looking at physiological density. It's gone way down in Europe. Still about the same in South America and Central America, but not in the Caribbean anymore. And it's still high in Southeast Asia and East Asia, but not as much South Asia. Now we're looking at agricultural density. And you're going to see a lot more countries have higher agricultural densities than they do physiological and arithmetic densities, just because it's talking about agriculture only. This isn't really referring to population anymore. We classify it as a population density, but it's not really that. It's a density of agricultural people. So it's only the density of farmers. So we can see there are a lot of farmers in Africa and Asia, because we're going to refer to those as stage 2 and 3 countries. Their economy is not as based on industry and manufacturing as places like the United States. Like, we have a ton of factories, we have a ton of people buying and selling stuff, we have a stock market. Countries in Africa and India and Bangladesh and all those places, they don't really have those things that we do. Their economy doesn't rely on that. So factors for population distribution, we're not really going to talk about that now. We talked about Thomas Malthus. I drew this graph for you. We talked about Esther Boserup. If you want to take a picture of the slide, it's just a great reference, because this is just like a theory. It's something you need to know. Okay, moving on. Population pyramids. This is the last thing we're going to talk about today. So they help us analyze the growth, decline, and demographic makeup of a society. So we're looking at this picture on the right, and we can see this actually looks like a period. But what if I told you population pyramids didn't always have to look like pyramids? So on this, we can say that the old people are at the top, because if we look on the y-axis, what we're going to see is age. So age is right here. And then we're going to see like percent of pop on the x-axis there. So, and we're also going to see two different pyramids here. So we're going to see one on the left and one on the right. And the one on the left is going to be for male. The one on the right is going to be for female. Usually they'll do like red and blue, because those are like typical colors, like baby colors. Woohoo, baby shower, people are being born. Wonderful. That kind of stuff. Yeah, that's there. So we have young kids right here in this age group before they turn 18. We have people who are economically active, and that just means they're going to hold a job. So this is people from graduating high school and college all the way up to retirement. Then we have old people up here. Now this is where population pyramids get different. This last bracket that I'm going to like highlight in yellow here, you need to make sure you're always looking at the scale of your population pyramids, because sometimes it'll just say 65 plus. Sometimes it'll say 80 plus. Sometimes it'll say 100 plus. Like this one, it has a really hot low top. It has a really like not very many people at the top, 0.0, but that's 100 plus. You're going to look at graphs that are going to look like they have a really big top, but it's actually because it just says 65 plus. So make sure you're always taking that into account. So old people at the top of a population pyramid, and then there are little old people, it's just going to be a dot. But when there are a lot of kids, like on this population pyramid, they make up the majority of the population. It's going to look like a triangle. Boom. Okay. So we can move on. Okay. Okay. So what can we learn from population pyramids? We can learn about the size of the population, so we can see like what percentage does each portion make up. We can see birth rates and death rates. So we can see if it has a high birth rate, if it has a big base. So birth base. Remember that, because if it's going to have a lot of babies, that means it's going to have a high birth rate. Death rate is going to be at the top. So at the very tippity top, we're going to see the old people. So if there are not a lot of old people, that means there's a higher death rate. So we can also see the gender makeup. So how much is men and how much is women? This country looks like half and half. And actually, this isn't a country. This is the world in 2017 with a population of 7.5 billion people. That's a lot of people. In TBH, it looks like we have about half and half men and women, which is what you'd expect. Life expectancy. Now, this is where I told you that this scale at the top really comes into play. Because if you see more than 1% of the population of a place, that's generally where you're going to see your life expectancy. You're not going to have to know a specific fact like that for the AP exam, but you will have to know that like above a certain age or like above a certain percent, I like to say 1% because that's just what I deem to be correct in my terms from taking this course and teaching it and tutoring people like this. 1% or 0.7% is where I say life expectancy is. Also, you don't just say life expectancy for a country unless the exam or your teacher or your test specifically tells you to. You always talk about life expectancy of men and women. So let's take the US, for example. It has an average life expectancy of about 77. For females, it's about 82. For men, it's about 71, 72-ish. We see this because men typically die of chronic diseases and preventable diseases, while women die of more natural causes and more uncurable diseases. Size of economically active populations. So when I use this vocab term right here, economically active, that just means there are people who can have jobs in our society. So it's going to show us what percentage of the population is working. And usually countries want to see a pretty high percentage of that because then people can make their country money. So there are 3 types of population pyramids. I told you, population pyramids don't always have to be pyramids. So we've got our basic triangle. This is a pyramid. This is a developing country. Curious how I talked about Namibia there and here. So it has a high birth rate, which birth rate, base. So it's going to have a big base like a triangle. Low life expectancy because it has a small top and a big base. Slow growth rates. And a growth rate is just CBR minus CDR. That's the rate of natural increase. So developed and slow growth. So this color I'm going to switch to brown. So this is like the USA. So slow growth still. High life expectancy though, because we have a pretty big top here. And low infant mortality. And that's because it's a developed country, so we have lots of health care. Developed negative growth. So this is going to be an upside down pyramid. So this is going to be an upside, forgot to switch colors. Sorry, y'all. So it's going to be an upside down pyramid. Low birth rate because it has a tiny base. High life expectancy, tons of people at the top, like it's even bigger than developed. Shrinking population. Now, when we talked about that natural increase rate earlier, NIR, which equals CBR minus CDR, when our crude birth rate is smaller, we're going to get a negative number for that. And a negative number here means a shrinking population. And the AP exam loves to point to Japan and Germany as examples of shrinking populations. Again, please stop me if I'm going too fast or I'm not making sense. So we can look at the shape of this pyramid. So it's Namibia. It's a triangle. Looks like the world's growth rate right now. USA. This kind of looks like a square. So generally, we like to cut off the shapes of our population pyramids around 80, 85. So from here down, it's mostly a square, like right here. Mostly the shape of a square. It's not going to be a square at the top because, 100 plus. Who lives to be 100 plus? Like nobody. Very few people. Japan. So Japan, it's not as preceded because, if you have a really, 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 really low crude birth rate and a really, really, really low crude death rate, your population pyramid is going to look like that. It's going to look like a V. We 1000% do not want a V. We kind of want a slight downward triangle. You can kind of see that there because our highest sector is right here from 65 to 69. That's retirement age. That means Japan is not going to have that many people in the workforce. When we talk about the economically active populations right here, we're talking about this range. And when Japan has less people in this range, and then we're looking at these age brackets right here, less people who are going to be coming into that range in future years, that means the population pyramid is going to topple over and Japan won't have a good economy anymore. Now that, what I just said was like a ton. Does everybody get what that means? I just used 17 vocab words in one sentence. Okay, good. So we're not going to talk about that. So we're looking at the city of Ann Arbor. Now, if anybody's from Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Midwest, does anybody know something really big that's in Ann Arbor that would cause the population to be lots of 20 to 24-year-olds, male and female? Anybody know? Anybody want to guess? Or should I tell you? Okay, no problem. So University of Michigan, U of M. I mean, Ann Arbor's in Minnesota. Michigan, right? Yeah. U of M, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, one of the biggest universities in the Midwest. Has a lot of people, rivaled by University of Wisconsin and something else I'm forgetting. It is a really big university. So that's why there are a ton of people in the age from 18 to 24. Because think about it, you graduate high school at 18, you go to college for 4 years, then you turn 22, and then you go to a graduate program maybe, which takes you about 2 to 3 years, and you're 25. So we're going to see a ton of people in this age range right here, male and female, because men and women go to college. So that explains that population pyramid. And when you're looking at this, always look at where it's from, because that'll really help you explain, what it is. And usually they'll show you something like very, very, very obvious, like more obvious than Ann Arbor sometimes, because, people need to be able to identify it nationally. United Arab Emirates. So I don't really have a lot of time to hint at a ton of things to give you this answer, but look at this. Look at how many more men than women there are. Look at this, tiny, lots of men, little women. This is not like the world. It is not half man, half woman. Why? Well, in the Middle East, it's a traditional Arab culture. So while most of them are Muslim and most people would point to Islam for things like anti-LGBTQ or anti-women or anti a lot of things, it's not really the religion there. It's actually the traditional culture. So they favor men over women because they don't like to give women rights. Like, women couldn't drive in Saudi Arabia until 2017. Women couldn't go to the movie theater alone in Saudi Arabia until 2017. Imagine. So there are going to be a lot less women because people are going to favor their babies to be male. So even though there are a lot of males and females here, right here, that's because we're getting more increasing opportunity. We're getting more laws that are allowing, we're not going to discriminate against genders anymore because it's the 21st century. We start the 21st century right here, because this is from 2017, so 21st century starts in 2001. So we're going to be about right here when the 21st century starts. And that's when you see that the genders are equal. Because in the past, they heavily discriminated based on gender, on the basis of sex. But now, it's less prevalent because we're in the 21st century. We're adapting to changing cultures around the world. And you can see a lot of things just from this one population pyramid, and that's why this is a really cool topic in AP Human Geography. And we can examine more of these next week, and that can be like a warm-up into our next topic. But yeah. I think we have one more. No, we don't need to analyze that. China's kind of a weird shape, but if you outline it, you can see lots of people here, little people here. Oh, look. Looks like a triangle. That's kind of the basic shape of that. We kind of explained what a triangle means already. Not going to go into depth into that one because I'm losing my voice a little. Okay. We're not going to do an FRQ because we don't got time for that, and I've already gone 5 minutes over what I said I would do. So let me stop screen sharing. Come back on camera. Hi. Okay. I'm back. So let's close today. What did we talk about? We talked about a ton. We talked about Unit 2. We talked some of Unit 1. And we also talked about a lot. We talked about population pyramids, Malthus. We talked about composition. We talked about demographics. We talked about development. We talked about economies. We talked about Unit 1 topics. We threw a ton at you guys today. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat before we end today. And I'm going to be here next week too to do office hours. If you guys have any questions, reach out in the Slack community, email me. That's my email. So you can email me for help with questions or Slack me in the community. I'll probably respond much quicker there. But just know that I'm available to help, and I'll host office hours almost every week, depending on when you guys are available to make it and stuff. But yeah, have a great night. And thanks on the shirt. Yes. Vanderbilt. Yay, college. Getting there soon. Alrighty. So have a great night, and bye guys.